Yang Speaks is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Stop putting your online data at risk. Get protected at expressvpn.com/yang. I think Joe's going to win, but then that's just the starting gun of this epic amount of work we have to do.
It's amazing. I feel like every week we say to ourselves, I can't believe it got worse, but it keeps getting. There's so many other things that keep happening. You're like, wow. And I do feel like your other book, The War on Normal People, is a real thing. That's gotten even worse too. Like the overlooking so many people and that are in need of basic, in need of a basic income or an economic opportunity, that's gotten even worse among all the other among the big giant problems. That real basic life, and economic opportunity has gotten worse.
It's one reason why I think Joe's going to win. That 72% of Americans say this is the worst time in American history in their lifetimes. I mean, that's not exactly 4 more years material. It's everyone's looking around being like, this is freaking awful. So I think, I think we're going to call an end to the Trump era, but then the hole's still going to be there. So, I have my shovel in my closet, metaphorically speaking, and I'm just waiting for the word to go out and start digging.
I've got just to speak to that, since it's right here. Hold on. I've got where is it? Is it right here? I've got a
real shovel?
A literal trowel that I was using to dig in the backyard for treasure. So, in the woods. So that's where I'm at.
A few days ago, I interviewed SNL star and head writer Colin Jost about his new book, A Very Punchable Face, at 6th and I, which is an art center, synagogue, cultural center in D.C. The event was virtual, of course, but had a great conversation. Enjoyed it immensely. Hope you do too. This is Yang Speaks with Colin Jost at 6th and I about his new book, A Very Punchable Face. Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Let's all give Colin Jost a round of applause. He'll be able to hear you from wherever you are, I promise. Your book is phenomenal. I enjoyed it immensely. I've been a fan of SNL since I can remember. So let's start with the title, A Very Punchable Face. I think most people find that funny. And there's a theme of self-deprecation throughout the book. So what was the process behind your deciding on a title? Because I know the title of your first book is actually kind of a big decision.
It is. It's like with music, you put out an album, the first one can just be your name. It's easy. That's just the industry standard. You got an eponymous album, but that's, with books, you got to actually think about it. I also, before I start, wanted to thank you. I'm very honored that you agreed to do this and talk to me. And I'm a big fan of yours. And I think what you brought to the campaign was such an elevated and fresh set of ideas. And you were just really fun to watch. And also you it was the only new ideas that were out there. And I really, I don't know, I gained a whole new idea of what a candidate could be from watching you. And I hope that your ideas continue and that you continue and make them a reality, because it was really inspiring to see. So thank you. And thank you for doing this, because it means a lot. I wrote about there's a lot of self-deprecating and humiliating things in my book. I really wanted my book to be entertaining. I didn't want it to be trying to be overly educational or pedantic in any way, or I didn't want it to be just taking weird victory laps about anything, or just name dropping stuff. I wanted it to be stories that I thought were that were funny and that people would like reading. And I ran everything through that filter. And it turns out a lot of those stories ended up being ones where I was injured, or humiliated or emotionally abused or just by my own dumb decisions got injured or put in a terrible position. And I thought that would be entertaining, and it seems like people do enjoy when injurious things happen to me.
Well, I confess that after reading your book, like, you did start to resemble one of those action movie heroes in my mind, where like you take your shirt off and then there's like this scar from that. This is from like the Google mishap. This is from the bike. This is from the surfing. so you started to resemble that kind of figure in my mind.
Wow.
You're also, as we all know, you're engaged to like a superhero that everyone's growing up with. So there's that too. Maybe that's another reason why you seem like an action hero.
I was going to say a real superhero, but also that's not. It is a movie, I guess.
So I confess to being, and this is one thing I liked about your book too, is that like your book was very, very personal, but like you said, it wasn't like a name dropping type book. It was like personal about your childhood, personal about your formative experiences, which were very funny, like consistently. I feel like I understand Staten Island better thanks to your book, and also I happen to have seen King of Staten Island relatively recently, and so like between that and your book, like I feel like I understand the fifth borough. Hopefully it's not an insult to call it the fifth borough.
That's one of the nicest things anyone's ever said about Staten Island.
Staten Island, we're part of New York. It's true. It's real.
We swear.
And so you went from Staten Island, you went to high school in the city, which also had many, many funny anecdotes. Certainly the most affecting, very, very quintessentially New York story, I thought, was the story of your mom and her bravery during 9/11. And I was in New York on that day. Like, I remember when the towers fell. It was a beautiful day in terms of the weather, like, not a cloud in the sky. And then you hear that a plane crashed in the World Trade Center. And I was part of the crowd of thousands that just started walking away from downtown. Like, I was near the Empire State Building. I showed up to work, and then this happens. And then everyone in the office is like, we should get the heck out of here. And then we start walking north. But your mom did the opposite. Your mom actually headed towards the towers, which to me is probably the most heroic thing I can imagine doing. Having been on the island that day, like, every human instinct is like, go away from what is happening. And she actually went towards it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how that instinct happens. I think you probably don't know until that moment happens, how you're going to handle it. And I think it probably for her came from knowing that all her, all the firefighters that she knew and worked with and loved were all in there, were closer or near the buildings. And I think she genuinely wanted to help them and help get them out of that situation or help treat them. I don't think she ever imagined that the buildings would both fall. I think that she didn't, she knew they had been hit, and she kind of gradually figured out once the Pentagon had been hit that there was clearly a coordinated terrorist act. But I don't think she ever thought structurally something like that would happen. I mean, it was so crazy to start seeing happening, because you don't, even when things get hit, you just don't expect that to happen. So maybe she, I don't know that she ever thought that I don't think she could imagine that would have happened. Yeah.
Well, that chapter certainly humanized you and your family in an incredible way, because frankly, people look at you and think, oh, SNL, famous celebrity, engaged to a celebrity. And then when you read about your mom rushing towards the towers, the fact that her life was saved twice by firemen who were like right there with her, that the people she was with lost their lives that day. And then you imagine, you, and obviously, like, people associate this with your castmate Pete Davidson as well. Like, you realize that, like, the human condition, like, it's your family, it's Pete's family, it's the 343 families that got that got devastated that day, who are families of firefighters, and it seems like your family has so much of like the firefighter DNA, like in your like your family's history. Like I felt like I got to know you better as a result of sharing in that experience.
It was, it's the community I knew the most. And it was, like my grandfather was a fireman. My great grandfather was a fireman. All my cousins and my uncles, everyone who lives on the block where my whole family lived, mostly on Staten Island, were all in the fire department. So I knew it forever as this really fun community of all these, like, I feel like firefighters are some of the funniest people and really a loving group of people. And then after that, there was a whole other, obviously element to it. And it was even more of a community, but in a whole different kind of way. And I thought that one of the most, the things that my mom said that was the craziest to me was, when I remember going to visit the fire department headquarters, where they keep basically a wall of the names of all the firefighters who died in the line of duty. And she said that in the first 100 years of the department, they filled one wall. And then that day on September 11th, they filled an entire other wall. Like that was what the sheer numbers for the department were. And Staten Island, obviously, including Pete's dad, was part of that wall and a substantial part of that wall on Staten Island. So, I'm very proud of my mom, and that's why I wanted to write that chapter. And I really feel for her of going through that and losing colleagues like that.
Yeah, I was surprised by so much of your background because, I think the very high level view is you went to Harvard. That's one thing. And you had like a really fun set of stories about Harvard. And so you don't think, mother works for the fire department. Grandfather was a fireman. You think like, oh, he went to Harvard, so maybe his parents were like orthodontists or whatever.
Or his parents were president and vice president of Harvard, or something.
Yeah, or something, right? Like the Winklevi. And then when you went to Harvard too, like you framed it in such human terms where like there's like this Harvard like mystique, and then like you unpacked it in such a humble way. So here in Yang Speaks, we care a lot about data. We think that our data is getting sold and resold, and we're getting packetized and commoditized in a way that's really bad for democracy and mental health and a lot of other things. And we're not seeing a dime of it. It's a drag, and they're keeping track of everything we do. So what do you do about it? One way to do it is to use ExpressVPN, and VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. All these high-end companies insist that their employees use VPN so that it's like they're logging into a safe and secure server, no matter if they're at home or at a Starbucks or whatever the heck it is. And you can do the same thing. And this way, your internet activity is anonymous. They can't track you. They can't sell and resell it. So if you want to protect your online activity today with the VPN rated #1 by CNET and Wired, visit expressvpn.com/yang, and you can get an extra 3 months for free on a 1-year package. That's expressvpn.com/yang, expressvpn.com/yang to learn more.
I'm literally using this right now to stream our podcast ads in our podcast. So it doesn't slow down your video and audio. I have no issues with it. expressvpn.com/yang. Get your discount. It's freaking fantastic. Check it out.
So one of your dorm mates and I became friendly on the trail, Pete Buttigieg. And so how much time did you spend with Pete when you guys were actually in school together and then afterwards?
I saw him. We were in the same dorm for 3 years, for sophomore, junior, and senior year. And so he was like roommates with one of my good friends from high school. And so I would see him a lot, and my friend Rob introduced us, and I would see him at dinner because we always, usually ate in the same place.
So during those dinners, did he lean over to you one day and say, "I'm going to be president one day"? Did he do one of those?
Yeah, and then ate a giant, ate like a whole mouthful of French fries and just stared at me, that kind of thing. Honestly, I would have never thought that he would be running for president. But of course, things make more sense in retrospect, because he was obviously politically minded, and he was. I think he studied government, if I'm not wrong, when he was there, or social studies that included government. But he he was clearly very smart. And he was always really sweet and unassuming, and was never, I talk about some people who were at Harvard who were really like trying to make they're smart, like kind of showing off.
Which is the most irritating thing in the world. It's like if you if you need to do that, you're probably actually not that smart if you need to try and prove it to me.
Yeah, or only later in life do you realize that it's some horrible insecurity that's related to or whatever it is, but that you will never be satisfied about in some way, like you'll always be trying to prove it. But he was not that. He was always very modest, yet, and those is the kind of person that clearly is smart, but doesn't need to tell you, But I didn't know him. I didn't know him well. I saw him around campus and was always happy to see him, but we never like hung out much except in an extended group.
So I'm going to share something that very few people could share, which is that as a candidate, when you see SNL start throwing up the debates, you're like, oh my gosh, like what are they going to do with me? And then having you imitate Pete, I thought you did a great job in that. It was really funny. Like some of the jokes you actually write in the book, actually you used for your impersonation of Pete. But so my question to you was did you ever feel like you were being too mean? Did you ever pull it back? Where you're like, oh man, this is actually gonna make me feel bad. If I'm too incisive.
I did, and some of them, some of the debates I wrote or co-wrote, and others I didn't. So it was interesting because, and that's typical sometimes at SNL. Different people will write different things, obviously, but I had never I had never done an impression like that. First of all, impression is generous, but I had never been in a sketch like that where it was clearly a lot of attention on it and on the detail of what was being said. And I, having written for it but not been in it previously, you instantly feel the humanity of the person you're doing an impression of in a way you don't think about when you're just writing it. And it's like I really wanted to be careful about it because I wanted to be fair to Pete, and of course you want to be funny, but I there were definitely things I said no to and cut and fought against because I thought they were either not fair or not either slightly mean or not thoughtful about who the person was. And by the way, Bowen was the same with you. In person, he wanted to be fair and always wanted to find fun in it, but not be, tearing you down because he respected you. And that's typically what it is. I mean, Maya was that way with Kamala. She cared about getting she's so funny as a performer that she's going to find something really funny just on a pure performance level. But you start to think about that, and when you are in more and more as a person that's just on the show to a much less degree in the spotlight, you start realizing how people perceive you or how people make jokes about you, and you're like, oh my God, I want them to feel somewhat true or fair as much as possible. But I'm sure watching it, even something that seems fair might feel weird, or having anyone impersonate you it must be crazy, right?
Well, I'm sure you've experienced it in your own way. I'll tell you, 100% honest to God, I was just thrilled to be included. When I was up there, it was yes, they've got an Andrew Yang impertator up there, and his last name's Yang. And so I think someone asked me about what I thought of Bowen's impression of me or impersonation. I was like, I loved it. Like, it's like some people, might have had a bone to pick, but I didn't. I was like, one, just thrilled that I was included, like as part of the sketch. And two, I actually had an instinct that Bowen wanted to be fair, like, and everything that he did, I thought was both funny and fair. So I had zero issues with how I was presented. But I was just curious in your case too, because it's not like Bowen and I really know each other. It's not like we went to college together in that way, except for the way that all Asians know each other. But in your case, you and Pete, like, had you socialized again after college? Like, you'd like seen him at a random wedding or any of that jazz?
I had seen him once or twice. Like, I had donated when he ran for mayor of South Bend because I just, remembered liking him in college.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
I didn't know who else was running, but I definitely knew Pete would be good at it. And then I had seen him like somewhere else. I remember someone showed me a photo of the two of us somewhere, like at a basketball game or whatever it was, or somewhere. And then when I first started after the first or second time I played him on the show, he was on Fallon. He was on the Tonight Show, which is obviously like 2 floors down from us in the building. So I went down and talked to him, and I was so happy to see him, and I was happy that he was happy to, seemed happy to see me.
Yeah.
It became such a small world because obviously he's on a show that's in our building. I was playing him on our show. He was on the Tonight Show, and the other guest on the Tonight Show was Scarlett. So I was like, wow, this is really a lot of many different worlds colliding.
Yeah, so that'd be another level too, is like we actually know the person you're playing. So that'd be like another level of, thoughtfulness, where you're like, oh snap, I could like just run into this person that, a little bit down the road. So your transition.
I'll use that as an excuse for why I wasn't a better performer in those moments, because there was so much going on in my head. I'll just put that out.
It was such a multifaceted performance. You were balancing like 16 things, calibrating very, very precisely. This is a uniquely and distinctly stressful, anxiety-ridden time for us all. And you got to take care of yourself right now. You have to try and get exercise and have a routine and get some structure. But even after all of that, what would also help is having someone to talk to. And I don't mean like Zooming your buddy and being like, hey, what's up?
Or talking to Zach all the time.
I mean like talking to someone about the fact that that shit sucks, that maybe, you're feeling some degree of negative emotion that it's new to you. And I'm thrilled to say that right now we have a new sponsor of the podcast, BetterHelp.com, that will actually hook you up with a therapist and resources online. It's convenient, professional, affordable. You just find a licensed professional counselor who will just talk you through stuff. And as usual, we have a deal for you. But over 1 million people are already using BetterHelp. That's HELP.com. And if you go to betterhelp.com/yang, you'll get 10% off your first month by being one of our podcast listeners. So that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/yang, to get yourself some help. And there's absolutely no shame, nothing negative, no stigma about it. I mean, I saw a counselor when I was in high school, and after that I said everyone should have one of these all the time, forever. So yeah, get yourself some help at betterhelp.com/yang.
So I'll say in our own organization, Andrew, at Humanity Forward, we're now in month 4, 5 of working from home. And I would say the entire team, self included, we're all collectively losing our minds. No offense, guys, if you're listening, but it's true. So I've recommended this to our team, and to use it there because, geez, man, like the world's burning. We all have to be stuck inside. We have to stare at screens all day long. The lack of like hope and optimism is something we're trying to overcome on this podcast, but it's still real. So that's BetterHelp, HELP, betterhelp.com yank. Get 10% off your first month, and it'll welcome you as a Yank Speaks listener. Hope you guys check it out.
So one thing that everyone loves is like the origin story for everyone. You know, like you hit the fast forward button and someone's like, oh, like, you know, a person's made it, they're successful. You do a great job of actually kind of digging into your origin story about your time at Harvard, where you just really wanted to work on the National Lampoon, which you got into or accepted to after like dozens and dozens of tries and like a year of rejection and the rest of it. And then you came back to Staten Island, lived with your parents right after college before moving out. And then you worked in journalism as the night editor of a Staten Island newspaper, the Staten Island Advance. And tell us about that. Like the craziest thing to me was that I think your shift was like midnight to 8 a.m., which I felt like would make anyone lose their mind.
Yeah, it really was physically pretty brutal. I mean, I am up for it. I mean, when you're 22, you're up for 21, 22, you're up for anything. So I was like, yeah, gung ho. But after a few months, you can't avoid your body starting to break down. And the worst part by far was commuting. I had just moved to the city with a group of friends. And then that was the job I got back on Staten Island. So after commuting from Staten Island to Manhattan for 4 years of high school, I finally lived in the city and started commuting back to Staten Island for a job. And that was, I would be getting on like an express bus from Staten Island through Brooklyn to Manhattan at 8 a.m. after working all night with people that were waking up and commuting like normal people. And that was really watching the sunrise on a bus through Brooklyn is not the most fun. But that job, except for the hours, that job was so fun. I loved that job. I wrote headlines, which is so fun, trying to think of like New York Post style headlines. I edited articles when there was no one available to write stories. I would fill in and write stories. I wrote a ton of obituaries, which I found like darkly fascinating. I really loved talking to the families because I really loved the idea of getting it right, like getting their life story right for their community who was going to read about it. Like I loved the weird details of people's lives and kind of teasing out the fun parts of someone's story. Because if you first talk to a family, they might not give you that. They might be like, oh, they were just like a homemaker. They kind of kept to themselves. But if you dig in so many of these stories, there's a fascinating hobby or some crazy weird period of their life that they don't think about until you start exploring it. So it was really, and it was also thrilling to put together a newspaper, to see it in the era where there were still print newspapers that people read, to see it physically go to the presses and to hear people yell, stop the presses, and mean it like a real thing from a movie because a story was breaking or whatever. That was really cool.
Did you ever randomly get to yell, stop the presses just for fun? Was that like...
Oh my God. Then someone really would have punched me if I just did it to yell it. No, I did not have that kind of authority.
Well, listening to your enthusiasm for journalism, it sounds to me like there was at least one point when you thought you might become a journalist. Is that accurate? Or I know you were very, very committed to comedy because you've been working on it for years already.
Yeah, I always liked journalism, and I did it, as an intern throughout high school. And I wrote as a reporter as an intern. I was an opinion writer, like op-ed writer for the Crimson, which is the newspaper at Harvard, for a year. But then it really became so much about friends and lifestyle and liking the idea, like being around people who are funny and having that element of what you're doing and trying to be funny was just so intoxicating, I think. And I whatever I did, whatever my job was going to be, I knew I wanted to be around people who were funny and try to do comedy in some way, because I really I just thought it made life so much better. Like, who doesn't want to be around people who are funny?
I'm friends with some comedians, and I have to say, you seem like one of the best adjusted comedians I know. Because it seems like most of the comedians I know have like not even that deep under the surface. You like just touch on a little bit, then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, like you got like.
Yeah, no, I know a lot of them, a lot of those comedians too. I am fairly, it's taken time. I work at it. I still have plenty of issues, but I work at it. I like go to therapy and work, and work at it all the time. And you discover things.
That's tremendous.
You have to work at and it's taken. I'm in such a better place now than I was 10 years ago, 5 years ago. But and I also ignored. I cared so much about comedy. Comedy was the thing I was most serious about by far. Way more serious about comedy than I was about relationships, about real life things like I don't know, like having a room that was even like livable, or having any sort of comforts in life. All I cared about was comedy, so I neglected a lot of elements in my life for a long time. And so I didn't have. I probably wasn't as unhinged as perhaps some other comedians are in certain ways, but I had a lot of deep things that I had to figure out because. I took comedy, weirdly, I took comedy more seriously than any other part of life.
Yeah, that comes through, and you're really forthright in your book about like the ups and downs and the insecurities that come with trying to be funny and becoming a writer on SNL. It sounds like a very, very, and it's not a knock. I mean, you're one of the, like the leaders now of this like last generation, but it seems very much like a sink or swim type environment where if someone shows up and they're not funny for a year, they're probably not going to be around for a year or two because none of their writing makes it on the show or none of their sketches make it. And it sounds like you had a real adjustment to that climate, despite the fact that it seemed like you were like a wunderkind, like everything just happened. But it seems like there were some real struggles, both while you were a writer and then eventually when you got more responsibility.
Yeah, there were times where it felt like you're on a roll and things are going well, and then there were real stretches where you were worried about getting fired. I was worried about getting fired a bunch of different summers, some as a writer and some as a performer, and the
plan B was always go to the cabin in Puerto Rico, right?
Right. My plan B always, I write about in the book. For some reason, I go to Puerto Rico a few times a year. I love Puerto Rico. I like doing fundraisers for Puerto Rico. I care a lot about it. And I would go. My relatives used to live there, and I always fantasized that I could just disappear to go to like a sleepy surf town in Puerto Rico, get off the grid. I don't even know. Off the grid is a term. I don't even know what that means, or I don't even think that practice.
We all know what you mean. I mean, for me, it's like that Mexican town in Shawshank Redemption. It's like Zihuatanejo. Yeah, like we all have our Zihuatanejo. So for you, it's Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I think we should. When Shay and I end Weekend Update eventually, our last one should be us on a beach in Zihuatanejo, meeting up Shawshank style.
Completely. You should totally do that. I don't mean to get too into it, but like, are you guys like a joint deal where it's like, are you like looking at each other being like, yo, when you're done, I'm done? Or is it going to be like
Yeah. I mean, I would never want to do it without him. I mean, I think he feels the same way. We've talked about it, but who knows? I don't think either of us would ever begrudge the other one whatever, they needed to do at different times. But, I would love, it would be so nice if we could continue doing something together in whatever capacity. It's lucky to find, when you find someone that you both love working with and you kind of look up to, even though you're working with them. And I would love to continue that in some way,
Yeah, you get into this in the book where they give you something of like a trial run at Weekend Update, and then the reviews are unkind. And I actually can relate to getting beaten up in the press somewhat, and then you're looking up being like, like what's happening? Like, does this reflect on who I am as a human? And then there's like the summer where the folks at SNL aren't really communicating with you that much, and then they bring you back in to like audition for a job that you already had been filling. And then they also had Michael Che audition, and then eventually they settle on the fact that they're going to team the two of you up. And now that's been a partnership that has been incredible for us all to see in real time grow. But can you talk a little bit about that summer of uncertainty?
Yeah, I can. It was a rough summer for a lot of reasons, and mainly because you're suddenly being there was the media part of it that was rough. That's one part of it. But the harder part of it was feeling like all your friends who you work with were kind of ghosting you. You know, like no one was actively being mean or anything, but you could just tell they were kind of like taking some distance.
There's a little bit of pulling back. Yeah. You do sense that sometimes.
You sense when they're your friends, you sense it. And I'm not upset about it. I understand it's just a strange situation, but I could sense that. And it's kind of like, when I don't know, I always feel like in the world of show business, when you're not hearing anything from people, it's a bad sign. And when you're not hearing anything from your friends, it's like a double pain, because you feel like rejected a little bit at your job, and you feel like you're losing friends. And so you start spiraling, and I didn't know what was going to happen, because I thought there was a real possibility that I was going to lose my job at Weekend Update and maybe lose my job as a writer at the show too, or sort of be impossible to go back to it, or not know, or feel so broken up by what happened. And I was used to being in a lot of meetings where things like this would be discussed, and to be completely in the dark.
And all of a sudden they're meeting about you, and you're like, I remember being in the meetings about other people.
Oh my God. And then you're like, oh, and also, by the way, it made me feel in a deeper way for everyone else who were my friends who went through that process too, as cast members, as writers, like how I remember Will Forte talking about, he didn't know whether he was going to get asked back. They keep putting him on like his contract on extension and not telling him if he was going to continue in the cast one summer. And he was out by where Lorne lives. Like he was coincidentally staying in the house next to Lorne. And he was talking about hiding in the bushes as he walked around to leave the house because he was afraid of running into Lorne, and Lorne seeing him and thinking he was following him and then firing him because of it. And it really messes with your mind, and you just don't know. You think you kind of feel like your career and your life is about to be over, even though that's dramatic. It just feels like that in the moment. You're like, oh God, I don't know. Will I work again? Will anyone want to hire me? And again, when it's your friends, that's the hardest part.
Yeah, that we can all experience. We can all relate our own like particular version of that. I mean, obviously not as public as you. Though I will say, for me, running for president, it was a real education. It's like you're on TV all of a sudden. And in your case, you've been like writing for a while, but you haven't been as much of a performer. And then you get out there, and when you feel like the public is rejecting you or whatever, it's actually like super painful. Like because you feel like you're putting yourself out there, and then like if people don't like it, then they don't like you, even though they don't know you as a person. It feels very, very personal.
And it's different. Like for me, for instance, with you as a presidential candidate, I don't remember ever seeing anything negative about you, like in a great way. Like not just saying it in I think people had really thought about you and liked you. And in my memory, the coverage of you was always really positive. And if anything, people were more like wanted you to be succeeding even more. Like they wanted you to be the nominee. And they were really, I felt like a lot of people were really pulling for you. Whereas I'm sure from your perspective, a couple things that people, and I'm sure you also had things where people that were so excited for you when you started in the media or so, whatever, or outlets in the media, then write something negative or then write something that feels like almost turning against you, and you're probably like, wait, you just were happy or you just were excited.
We're friends. What the hell's going on? Like, yeah, you hung out with me on the trail for like days.
Right.
Yeah.
It's super, because there's part of it is like you're worried about even how people that are, you're not always worried about what the person thinks that's writing something negative about you. You almost worry like people you care about in your life will read it and be like, oh yeah, wow, I didn't think about that. He is bad. So silly.
I thought I knew Colin, but now that I read this random review of him, like, it's made me think of him totally differently. Yeah, like you do.
Yeah, you
get weird thoughts in your head.
And if your friend actually did think that way, that would be a terrible friend. And my friends wouldn't have thought that, as your friends would never have thought that. But I'm sure that you kind of go to those places in your head, even though you shouldn't.
Well, Colin, I have a tip. I mean, you're now well past this, but my tip for myself.
I'm kind of in the middle of it.
I actually know you are in the middle of it, because writing a book is very personal. Putting a book out there is personal. Talking about the book is personal. And there are people behind the book too that you again feel like you're going to disappoint. Like there were folks that supported you in various ways. I went through that with my first book in 2014, which no one even remembers, honestly. So I know you're still experiencing it for sure. And everyone watching this, you should know Colin's book, or listening to this. Colin's book is funny. It's personal. It's edifying. If you have an interest in comedy and writing and humanity, it's a great book. It's a great read. It's going to do enormously well. But the fact that you're still in the middle of it, like people from the outside looking in being like, Colin's on top of the world. Like, he must not have any of these insecurities that the rest of us have.
I feel like I'm in the middle. Like I'm first of all, I feel like in the middle or even still at the beginning of a career and figuring out so many things, and always worried and scared that I'm not good enough, or I'm losing things that I liked. If I'm not doing stand up for a week, and now because of this for months, you feel like you're losing your edge at doing it and your ability to do it, and it's kind of a constant fear of losing that, whatever it is, both relevancy, but also your just actual ability of doing it well. It's like a thing you want to always keep sharp, and there's so many things I want to do, and I get very overwhelmed and often feel like, why am I not accomplishing more? Why am I not getting this done, that done? Like huge things that I'm like, this is important, and I'm not doing it.
Well, you could be like Michael Che and then head to this cornfield in Ohio where they're doing live comedy right now. I don't know if Michael's talked to you about that.
It looks so fun. I keep seeing pictures of him and Chappelle and Michelle Wolf and people like having a great time. So fun. Yeah.
I was joking with Michelle that like the world capital of live comedy is that cornfield in Ohio right now, which I think is true.
The only place. It's incredible.
Okay, so if you're like us, you listen to music and maybe you have that headset, but you're noticing some folks around you have these earbuds or the AirPods or these like wireless things. And you're like, wow, maybe I should get myself some of those. But maybe you're daunted by the fact that some of them are really expensive. Now, we were sent some Raycon earbuds, and they're like the sweet spot where instead of breaking the bank, they start at about half the price of the earbuds that have been scaring you off. I've got a pair right now in my hand and my ears, was one in each, which is sort of bizarre. But they work great. They actually are really snug and indiscreet. Like people can't even tell you have them on necessarily. And they're freaking beautiful, stylish. Celebrities love them. So some of the celebrities that use them, because like I kind of like some of these people: Snoop Dogg, Cardi B, and J.R. Smith. NBA champion J.R. Smith use these earbuds. So they are the sweet spot. I'm a fan. Raycon's earbuds hit the mark. Now's the time to get their new everyday earbuds, and you can get 15% off your order at buyraycon.com/yang. That's buyraycon.com/yang for 15% off Raycon wireless earbuds. You can join the future. You could be one of those cool people or annoying people that are around you that have made you feel deficient. Soon you will make others feel deficient at raycon.com/yang.
I'll say this. I've bought the expensive earbuds and I've lost them. Then I feel like I've lost. It's like losing a cell phone. These are not that you designed to lose them, but if you do lose them, they're less expensive. And with us, you get a pretty good discount. So buyraycon.com/yang, get 15% off. Buy as many as you can. And they sound great.
Great gifts too. Great
gifts. Yeah, give the gift of Raycon.
So one other thing I have in common with you and Michael Che was that I was a big wrestling fan growing up, and I could tell from your references that you definitely were too. And then Michael talked you into doing WrestleMania with him, which you wore street cred among your your high school classmates and everyone else, which I can understand. It'd be like SNL, yeah, and then like you're in WrestleMania, it'd be like holy shit. So you have a very entertaining chapter about you guys showing up for WrestleMania and that. But do you have a story that was either in or outside the book around that experience?
It's funny when you say that too. You also were a debater, so I talk about speech and debate. You were, I think, doing it on a higher level. I was doing I talk about it being the track and field of for nerds. But you were at an Olympic level, I would say, for among nerds for the U.S. debate team.
That's nice of you.
Yeah, of course. But the debaters that I was friends with all would go into a hotel room on tournaments or like speech and debate tournaments, and all the debaters particularly would reenact wrestling matches like on the hotel beds, like
yes.
W at the time wrestling matches, and those were and like really got into it, and those were all the friends that showed up at WrestleMania, and I was like living out their debate, high school debate, hotel bed dreams in Giant Stadium. And so it was pretty cool that they came and were there for it. That was pretty awesome.
3 things that have a lot in common with each other, in my experience: professional wrestling, comedy, politics. I kid you. I kid you not, Colin. Like
there are weird overlaps there, huh?
Yeah, there are. It's like one reason why Jesse Ventura, became governor, and I'm sure like had world-class potential. And people talk about The Rock running for president. He would do great, because like that there were times where like I'd be at some rally and like they had some like essentially like bake off, and they like throw you out there and you'd be like, you have 5 minutes, go. And the frame of reference I used was literally just a pro wrestler. It was just like, go out there and cut a promo.
It actually almost looks like the promos, like back, when they do the interstitial promos in wrestling, they have such a political campaign vibe, and it's like that wrestler has that 30 seconds to get their message out and taunt their opponent and set up the next showdown. And it's, hey, Trump also appeared in wrestling.
WWE programming for sure. So keep an eye out for anyone who tries to cross over from one of those 3 to the other, because I predict success. So that chapter cracked me up on so many levels because of the fact that I was such a fan. So you talk about, you like came of age at SNL, literally everyone who's come through. You've been a head writer, been on Weekend Update, and the rest of it. And like your book, toward the tail end, you talk about this maturation process and how now you're starting to imagine life after SNL. And it could be that this book in some ways is like a bit like the beginning of your thinking about it. You talk also about the fact that now, you're just more mature, like you're engaged to be married, like you're more interested in non-comedy things in terms of like spending time with people. So what might the future hold for you? Like if you were to leave SNL, what would you want to work on?
Well, it would definitely still be comedy in whatever I do. I mean, there's like a horror movie that I'm kind of working on that I've thought about for a long time. But even that has big elements of comedy. And like even something like that, it's hard for me to do something that doesn't have at least some comedy to it. So that's the broad answer, that it'll always be connected to comedy. But there are different kinds of goals. There's writing goals I have. There are acting goals that I have, and down the road there are producing, directing goals that I have.
Wow.
And there are business goals. Like I'm fascinated. It so well, but the business side of so many things is really fascinating to me, and I love using my brain in that way. Like that's like a great outlet that I don't now just have time to do in the same way. I mean, there's always business involved in whatever you do, but
it's different. I get it, man. I get it.
Yeah, and seeing something through, you've seen, companies through, and that must be a cool feeling, right? I mean, that must feel like you build something and then it keeps going, or someone buys it, or those must be thrilling feelings, right?
Yeah, it's very much a creative process, Colin, and your instinct around it is spot on. And I gotta say, you and other world-class creatives I know actually have a lot in common with very successful entrepreneurs. And so the fact that you're attracted to that makes perfect sense to me. I think you're going to be successful at whatever you do on any of those dimensions, but I can imagine you becoming like a real enterprise builder, production company builder, because a lot of the creative stuff you do, it's like the same stuff. It's like, you have like a vision, you get the pieces together. In your case, sometimes it's just like a sketch, but your attitude is exactly the one you need, which is like, okay, try it. It works. Like, like iterate quickly. Don't take the failures too much to heart, because you can just get back out there. It's pretty much what entrepreneurship looks like in many, many dimensions. I gotta say, like, I love what you do on SNL, but like the sky's the limit for you afterwards. Like the end of your book actually got me excited about what you could sink your teeth into if you ever decided to leave.
Well, thank you. That's very nice. I mean, whatever business you want to do, I'm in. We'll do it. We'll split it right down the middle, 80-20 me, and we're in. Let's do it.
We'll cut Che in two. That way we'll have like 3 of the major continents covered. All we need then is like a Latino and like a couple of other types.
Yet somehow.
Yes. So I'm going to go to audience questions, but I had one question for you that came up in the book. It didn't come up in the book, but it was a book that came to mind for me. So you talk about Lorne Michaels as like this godfather figure. He has done so much for so many people, for the culture. We've all kind of had our upbringing shaped by Lorne in some ways. And it seems like you and Lorne have developed like a real respect and admiration. Like, what happens when Lorne ever decides to leave? I mean, he is in his 70s. Like, is there an heir apparent? And I got to say, reading this book, it struck me that you would be the logical heir apparent, because you've been the head writer, you've been a performer. Like, has that ever come up where Lorne was like, you will be the new Lorne, or who's going to be the new Lorne? Does anyone ever think about that stuff?
It definitely has not come up. Lorne is uniquely good at this job, and I think has gone through so many phases of it. Like from when he started and what that sort of, again, entrepreneurial startup vibe probably was of that show, when it was in this weird time slot Saturday night, and how cool and scrambly to figure it out was, to, I think also he probably had very strange periods of time where he had to, probably even like 80s, 90s, that kind of thing, where he had to fire, friends, or he had to, fire people he even really liked, or had network battles. And, I bet he's evolved. And then all the time, he also got married, had kids, his kids grew up. He suddenly has people in the show that are younger than his kids. Like for him, he must have evolved so much as the show went along. There's not been a discussion, and I don't know, I could imagine him doing it still for a while longer. He's still really, he's there every day. He's almost people can't believe he still is. He still, he still says no to friends' weddings or big anniversary, whatever things that are important otherwise in his life, to be there for the show. And I don't know, and it's, if I thought about it down the road, the hard thing is it's Lorne's show. So part of me always likes the idea of doing something new from scratch after this instead of continuing it, even though I really do love it. And I believe in it as a kind of like concept that keeps working in different ways, or doesn't work and then gets fixed or needs to be fixed. And I think, it's such a cool place. And I would kind of have an itch to start my own thing, I think.
I understand that itch very well. And yeah, Lorne will probably be there until he's like 300 or something. He'll come back, it'll be like SNL's 240th anniversary.
Yeah, I know. We'll be like, oh, great. Yeah, remember we talked about that 7 years ago?
We're going to talk about something that you think about every waking moment, stamps. Well, you might not think about every waking moment. Maybe not waking every waking moment.
But you dream about them.
But you have to mail something periodically. I literally have to mail something right now. And the old way, the 20th century way, is go to the post office, wait online, do all that jazz. So what's the 21st century way? Stamps.com. You can order whatever you need. You essentially can have a post office on your phone or computer. They'll even send you a freaking scale if you set up your account and get discounts of up to 62%. This is really just a smarter way to mail stuff. That's actually just the truth of it. We use stamps.com religiously on the campaign trail because there was a lot of postage getting mailed out right now. Actually, business tip from Andrew Yang. Apparently right now people are reading their mail at higher levels than normal. So if you're trying to reach people, mailing stuff is a good idea right now. And right now, if you want to sign up for stamps.com, you can get a 4-week trial plus free postage and that digital scale I mentioned without any long-term commitment. Just go to stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the page, type in Yang. That's stamps.com, enter Yang, and then you too can enjoy 21st century convenience with 20th century post office goodness. Okay, so we're going to now take some audience questions. This is a fun one, and you talk about this in the book somewhat. What is your favorite sketch that you've written?
What's my favorite sketch? That's a hard question because there's certain ones are favorites for different reasons. One of my favorites was writing, especially as a character, was writing with Cecily, her as the girl at a party that you wish you hadn't started a conversation with. That's been like an ongoing one that she's really such a brilliant performer and writer too. And writing those is really fun, and it feels like a person we all know. And I just felt like it was a good, it kind of captured that kind of person well, and it was always good to come back to. And actually, her and Vanessa have these porn star characters that were some of my
hysterical. They're so funny.
Those are some of my favorite because it's not that long. Each one's 4 minutes long. We've done probably 11 of them through the years, spread out, every different kind of product placement, weird thing in it and I talk about it a little bit in the book, but there's so many weird moves in them that I love. Like they have lists of adjectives they just do, and then they have weird dark stories from their past lives. And then the host is usually a guy that's also in porn and always has some weird vendetta against like someone in high school who said something to them. There's a lot happening in those 4 minutes. So that's a fun world to start thinking about, like, what the hell is this?
If you're a fan of SNL, you'll love this book because Colin goes through a bunch of his sketches and some of the process, and it's like a trip down memory lane where you remember like your favorite sketch set, right? You know, you're like, oh, like the one that made me laugh out loud in the book. It was like the underground music festival sketches. Like those are always like just on the brink of madness. Like, and it does remind you of real late night stuff you see where you're like, is this for real? Or like, are these people really going to get together?
I'm so glad you like that, because that is also really one of my favorites. Me and Mike O'Brien, who's a writer, always used to do this together. And it was like, and the thing is, the Insane Clown Posse really do these gathering of the Juggalos festivals, which we based on. And they also contacted us and like sent us stuff, you know, like invited us to go to the real festival. And I was like, oh my God, imagine actually going and seeing, not that far off from this crazy thing that we put out there, and being there in person. And that was a little too scary to do.
I can't say I've gone to that level, but I've been all over the country, and I went to like the first several Lollapaloozas, which were like, a million times like, more legit than the stuff, but like, but still like that.
Have you been to every state at this point?
I did a count recently, and I think I'm at like 42 or whatnot. There are like 8 that there'd never been a reason to campaign in because of our messed up system. So like I've never been to the Dakotas. I've never been to like some places like that that keep me below the 50, but I'm in like somewhere in the low 40s.
Like what was like before you were running for president, where was your state count at beforehand, do you think? Do you know, or not really?
It was higher than normal because Venture for America operated in a dozen cities around the country, including some places I'd never been before Venture for America. So Alabama, Missouri, like a lot of Ohio. Ohio's not that exotic, I suppose. I should name a state that I'm less likely to have gone to. So I was
Ohio.
I've been to Ohio a lot. I have a lot of friends there. So including Dave Chappelle and the rest of it. I was actually on the way to visit him when the pandemic hit. I was supposed to go, and that's why Samantha or Michelle Wolf is still there. She went visiting him for like a benefit, and then quarantine happened, and now she's like living in the guest house. We're joking they should name the guest house after her.
Going back and forth. That's awesome. Have you gone out?
No. We
should go together to one of those shows. Be fun.
Yeah. We should. I'd have to get family approval. But we're joking they should just name it the Michelle Wolf Guest House at this point, because she's been there for like 5 months in a row. So I think I was at like 28 states before the campaign. So I visited another 14. What is the first thing you're going to do after the pandemic ends? Like if there's probably something live comedy related, I'd imagine. Something more indulgent.
My mind went to non-work, but yes, sure. Yeah, I mean, probably the first thing is going to be SNL, I would guess, I hope. That'll probably be the first thing. But I would really love to do some kind of travel. We definitely wanted to do some, some kind of, nice trip at some point. But, I don't know when that will be or where it can be. But I miss that. The biggest thing is just going to be to see friends. I mean, I saw a couple friends that surprised me, that came out and surprised me for my birthday. And it was just the most joy I felt in so many years, seeing really good friends that you haven't been able to see. and laughing, catching up. I can't believe it's like it's gone so long, you forget how good it feels.
Wow, we can all relate to that. I mean, I have a niece that I didn't meet for like the first 6 months of her life because you know my brother was very like cautious, which you understand. You're like, yeah, I get it. But then on the other hand, you're like, come on, I want to meet my niece. So like, so when it eventually happened, like I felt some version of the joy you're talking about. We all miss it, man. We all miss each other. Hopefully, this book talk is a simulation of the human contact that we all miss.
It's almost like human contact. Yeah.
Yes.
Wait, we should do a service. That's a good commercial parody that we could write. Like FedEx for nieces you haven't met, where they'll FedEx the niece to you. You can say hi, FedEx are back, We're good.
Yeah, like make sure she's like wrapped in bubble wrap. So like
I've gotten delivered, a friend sent us steaks from Peter, you could probably send a niece. We'll figure it out.
Yes.
That's the thing about commercial parodies. The real logistics don't have to make sense. You just all magic.
Oh, actually, you probably had a hand in a lot of these. What's your favorite commercial parody that you had a hand in writing? Like, did you write some of those?
Yeah, one of my favorites ever is this one that was called Red Flag perfume.
Oh yeah, with Kristen Wiig, right?
Yeah, with Kristen Wiig. That was one of my favorites because it was like her, she was so great at it. It was like the prime of her SNL career, and it was like the first commercial parody of the year, and it was like just fun to think about what are the kinds of things that are red flags.
She's lived in Las Vegas for 10 years, something like that, or whatever.
Yeah, one fingernail that's way longer than the rest, things like that. It was really fun, and she was just so so good at looks, adding other kinds of visual elements to it that I hadn't even thought of. But it looked beautiful. It looked like a real great perfume commercial. Our director Reese Thomas shot it, and it was like. I remember filming down at the like an old courthouse building or something down by Wall Street that just was this beautiful wood panel, like a space in New York that is so gorgeous and you've never heard of it or seen it. And so it also took me down there. It was like such a wonderful shoot, and I thought it came together well.
Yeah, those are the best parodies where you're looking at it being like, is this real? Like, it seems so well done. And then it takes
we should have sold the perfume.
Yeah, you left some money on the table there. That could be like your first foray into random household fragrances.
What's the thing you're going to do, by the way, after quarantine? Do you know?
I mean, right now, I'm focused on helping Joe win, and then hopefully being in position to help dig us out of this hole. So right now, I expected to be campaigning for Joe, but as it is, it's just like beaming into stuff, which I will confess, given that like my kids were starting to forget what I looked like down the stretch of the campaign, like it's had its silver lining because, like I thought I'd be in Milwaukee, and Michigan and Pennsylvania and the rest of it by now. So after quarantine ends, I'm sure like I'll be out there because, it's all hands on deck. This is a dark time, and I think Joe's going to win, but like then that's just like the starting gun of this epic amount of work we have to do.
Yeah, it's a pretty crazy. It's amazing. I feel like every week we say to ourselves, I can't believe it got worse. But it keeps there's so many other things that keep happening. You're like, wow. And I do feel like your, just even your other book, The War on Normal People, is a real thing. That's gotten even worse too. Like the overlooking so many people and that are in need of basic. In need of a basic income or an economic opportunity, like that's gotten even worse among all the other among the big giant problems. That real basic life, and economic opportunity has gotten worse, that's the thing that was kind of the one thing people thought they'd get out of, having Trump in office, and that's gotten worse. So you're like, what is in it? What's in it for Americans now? That's what I keep thinking, like, what's the upside?
Yeah, it's one reason why I think Joe's going to win. That 72% of Americans say this is the worst time in American history in their lifetimes. I mean, that's not exactly like 4 more years material. It's like everyone's looking around being like, this is freaking awful. So I think, I think we're going to call an end to the Trump era, but then the hole's still going to be there. So, I have like my shovel in my closet, metaphorically speaking, and I'm just like waiting for the word to go out and start digging.
I've got here, I got just to speak to that, since it's right here. Hold on. I've got where is it? Is it right here? I've got a
real shovel?
A literal trowel that I was using to dig in the backyard for treasure. So, in the woods. So that's where I'm at.
That's a very lethal looking trowel. I'm
serrated edges. Yeah.
I missed it. Where are you physically right now, Colin?
Out in Long Island, like out east in Long Island. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So the last audience question we're going to get to, I think it's interesting, is, and I hope you understand what this means more than I do, because I just have a vague sense, but I think you probably will. With Gen Z humor being different from that of other generations, what do you think the future of comedy will look like, especially for shows like SNL? I thought this would be a good way to end.
That's a great question. Yeah, I'm technically a millennial, but so I feel like I grew up really knowing Gen X the most, I would say. Like that was so much of my influence. So I have a lot of the desire to do everything of millennials, but I have a lot of the self-doubt and self-hatred of Gen X. So I'll have an idea like, oh, I could do that. And then I'll be like, no, you can't. Like I'm in that combo world. But I think it will, I think every generation finds their own comedy the way they find their own music. And, I now in my life, I never want to look back and say that music sucks or that comedy sucks, because I remember how many people said that about comedy I loved or music I loved. And now, people are look back at some of those things as classics, and, think about like Jim Carrey, and his early movies were some of the most meaningful movies that I saw, like Ace Ventura and Dumb and Dumber. And, it's not like those were well reviewed, but they were so influential for, at least a generation. And I think that's going to be the case. Comedy will find what that is exactly, and we might not really know what it is now. But at the end of the day, funny is funny. Like people who are funny, things that make you laugh. And there are not as many people doing that as you'd think. Like when you start out, you're like, there's probably millions of people that are really funny, and then
millions.
After a while, you're like, it might be 50 or 100 or something. Just as when you think about business or you think about certainly politics, so you in your mind,
the universe shrinks very quick.
Oh my God! And you're actually like, there's so few people I trust, or so few people I think are good at this. And actually, you find people across fields actually who you recognize as, oh, they're really smart and good, even though I don't totally know their world. You see them and you see their talent, even if it's not in the field you're in. And I don't know. I think comedy will keep evolving. It will go through cycles. It will, maybe it feels, for some people, it feels sensitive, then it will correct and be way the other way, and breaking up that. And I think it'll keep evolving. And I'm excited to see where it goes. So many people are pessimistic about comedy, but I also think there's so many really bright, funny comedians working right now who are going to get more and more of a voice. And I think that's great.
Well, whatever the future of comedy is, you're going to have a huge role in it. Let's give Colin Jost a huge round of applause. Everyone go out. I think most of you have already bought his book by virtue of being here tonight, but read it, spread the word. A Very Punchable Face is a very enjoyable book.
I would have put that on the back. It's too late. I'll put it. That's maybe on the paperback. Maybe on the front.
The paperback. You could definitely use that for the paperback, which this will definitely be printed in before very long. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for Six and I. Colin, it's such a pleasure. All the best to you and the family. And congratulations on a massive achievement. It's something you should be really, really proud of. And I know how much work goes into it. I know how much you invest personally. You should be really proud.
Thank you. I thank you again for doing this. And I'm very excited to see your future. And I thank you for doing your part. And I hope you're a big part of this next administration. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, please do subscribe to Yang Speaks and click on notifications so we can let you know every time we have a new episode.